Imagine a world where the planet's wealthiest nation crumbles in mere days. Picture the very country that once championed global prosperity suddenly grappling with widespread destitution, its citizens begging for sustenance on the streets. And what if I told you this catastrophic downfall wasn't sparked by conflict, but by a pervasive illusion? It was the profound yet ultimately baseless conviction that economic growth and personal wealth would expand indefinitely. This is the harrowing account of the Great Depression of 1929, the pivotal moment when the cherished American dream tragically fractured, descending into an inescapable nightmare for millions. But before we immerse ourselves in this compelling journey, one defined by unchecked greed, societal chaos, and the spectacular collapse of a once unshakable financial empire, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. And do leave a comment below, letting us know which other fascinating, perhaps unsettling chapter of human history you'd be eager for us to unravel next. December 1918. Across Europe, the air was filled with the somber tolling of bells, not a sound of jubilant celebration, but rather a weary echo of profound exhaustion. The Great War finally concluded, leaving behind a scarred continent littered with devastated ruins, crushing national debts, and widespread, gnawing hunger. Nations like France and Germany were left hemorrhaging, their populations decimated, their economies shattered. Vast, historic entities such as the Ottoman Empire and the venerable Austro-Hungarian Empire simply dissolved, erased from the world map. A whole continent appeared to buckle, collapsing under the immense burden of its own self-inflicted destruction. Yet, across the vast expanse of the Atlantic, an entirely different narrative unfolded. While Europe grappled desperately, struggling to resurrect itself from the ashes of conflict, the United States experienced an unprecedented era of flourishing prosperity. The very factories that once churned out instruments of war then pivoted, producing not weapons, but tangible dreams for the masses. Sleek new automobiles, indispensable refrigerators, captivating radios, and a burgeoning array of modern home appliances. This period marked the true genesis of the American way of life, a captivating new lifestyle aggressively marketed as promising boundless abundance, cutting-edge modernity, and guaranteed success for everyone. In Detroit, the burgeoning hub of the automotive industry, gleaming Ford models began to dominate the dusty thoroughfares. Their powerful engine roared, effectively drowning out the lingering, painful echoes of war. Within homes across the nation, families gathered in rapt attention around a magical, glowing device, the radio. From its speaker, they absorbed the latest music, vital news updates, and delightful comedy. And on the silver screens of movie theaters worldwide, a beloved figure with a distinctive mustache and an iconic bowler hat effortlessly brought joy and laughter to millions. The inimitable Charlie Chaplin. In the 1920s, America truly felt invincible, bathed in an almost mythical glow of endless prosperity. This sense of affluence seemed perpetually guaranteed, yet this captivating illusion harbored a steep, hidden cost. During the preceding war, the U.S. government had strategically launched a powerful patriotic campaign, urging its citizens, if you can enlist, invest. Buy a Liberty Bond. Millions of Americans responded wholeheartedly to this call. An astonishing number, over 66 million individuals, purchased these bonds, representing more than half of the nation's entire population at the time. By doing so, the United States not only successfully financed its immense wartime expenditures, but, perhaps more significantly, initiated millions of ordinary citizens into the previously unfamiliar world of investing. And it was precisely at this juncture that a profound societal transformation truly began. A nation historically known for its thrift and prudence suddenly pivoted, embracing a new culture of unrestrained spending. Alongside this, consumer credit emerged as an enticing new promise, emblazoned with the alluring slogan, "Buy now, pay later." Retailers eagerly offered everything from stylish furniture and cutting-edge radios to gleaming new automobiles through convenient installment plans. Money felt effortlessly acquired, and the future appeared unequivocally guaranteed. This culture of rampant consumption rapidly integrated itself into the very fabric of the national identity. Cities sprawled outward, towering skyscrapers pierced the urban skyline, and the powerful bankers of New York, gazing down from their elevated perches, watched it all unfold with self-satisfied smiles. Everything appeared flawlessly perfect until an insidious, palpable greed began to crystallize. Unbridled speculation stealthily infiltrated every sector, every corner of the burgeoning economy. What had once been a robust, solid financial structure now began to expand unnaturally, perilously, like an overinflated soap bubble teetering on the verge of bursting. The radiant promise of the American dream shone with captivating intensity, yet paradoxically, few dared to examine it too closely. For those who did venture to scrutinize, the nascent, ominous cracks forming just beneath the glittering surface were already discernible. At the vibrant, pulsating heart of New York City, nestled amidst a forest of gleaming skyscrapers and the incessant, rhythmic clamor of streetcars and automobiles, lay a remarkably short, narrow thoroughfare, Wall Street. Its evocative name originated from an ancient defensive wall erected by 17th-century Dutch settlers to safeguard their fledgling community from potential incursions by both indigenous peoples and rival English forces. That original defensive barrier had long since crumbled into history centuries prior. However, by the 1920s, an entirely different, far more formidable kind of wall had silently ascended in its stead, an invisible, yet omnipresent, edifice constructed from untold sums of money, immense power, and unbridled greed. Wall Street outwardly presented itself as the hallowed temple of unbounded prosperity, yet its priests were hardly cloaked in traditional robes. Instead, they were impeccably dressed in custom-tailored suits and adorned with expensive, fashionable hats, exuding an air of formidable authority. Among this influential cohort, one name in particular shone brightly, almost dazzlingly: Charles Mitchell. A charismatic and visionary banker, Mitchell fundamentally reshaped the American public perception of investing. He possessed a singular insight that few others had fully apprehended. The public, having already grown accustomed to the perceived safety and patriotic duty of purchasing war bonds, harbored a nascent trust in the concept of investment. Mitchell seized upon this powerful idea and ingeniously transmuted it into a colossal, profit-generating enterprise. He reasoned that if people had willingly bought Liberty bonds during the war, they would now be equally eager to purchase stocks, actual shares in legitimate companies that promised the allure of rapid and supposedly secure profits. Indeed, in an era brimming with ambition, who among the populace wouldn't aspire to rapid wealth accumulation? With astonishing speed, Mitchell spearheaded the opening of brokerage offices spanning the entire nation, thereby establishing direct connections between ordinary individuals and the once exclusive world of the stock market. Farmers tending their fields, diligent secretaries, and hardworking laborers alike, virtually everyone yearned for a tangible slice of this burgeoning dream. The stock market swiftly transformed into a captivating national spectacle. Newspapers avidly published sensational stories of seemingly average people who had amassed fortunes overnight. Even celebrated movie stars began making high-profile investments, their every financial move instantly generating headlines. Charlie Chaplin, long revered as an icon of humor and entertainment, unexpectedly emerged as a potent symbol of newfound financial success. Yet, beneath this glittering facade of opportunity lay a crucial, deceptive catch. Mitchell and the other powerful, influential bankers weren't engaging in genuine investment practices. Rather, they were deeply embroiled in rampant speculation. Their strategy involved purchasing deliberately overvalued stocks, then swiftly reselling them at even more inflated prices, systematically fueling an ever-expanding, profoundly artificial market bubble. The perceived growth in the market wasn't rooted in any authentic underlying value or economic productivity, but solely in a powerful collective illusion. And such an illusion, by its very nature, was destined to shatter, sooner or later, with devastating consequences. Concurrently, banks were dispensing loans with alarming abandon, utterly devoid of sensible oversight or regulation. Ordinary people, caught in the speculative fervor, were increasingly taking out substantial loans specifically to purchase stocks, essentially wagering their entire financial futures on the unwavering belief that the market's upward trajectory would continue indefinitely. Astonishingly, an estimated 90% of all stock market operations at this time were conducted using borrowed money. It was, in essence, sheer madness meticulously disguised as legitimate, sustainable success. Lurking discreetly behind this unfolding financial drama stood the true monarchs of capital, the self-proclaimed Wall Street royalty. Their ranks included names that resonate powerfully even to this day: J.P. Morgan, Thomas Lamont, Albert Wiggin, the undisputed titans of finance, deftly pulling the strings of the market from the shadowy recesses of power. These powerful figures adamantly insisted that the market possessed an inherent capacity for self-regulation, vehemently arguing against any need for government intervention or oversight. And Washington, seemingly utterly blinded by the dazzling spectacle of unprecedented prosperity, uncritically accepted their assurances. A succession of 3 Republican presidents, Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover, each, in turn, chose to look the other way. Harding reveled in the initial boom. Coolidge enthusiastically celebrated it, and Hoover, tragically, inherited the ticking time bomb of an economy just moments shy of its cataclysmic explosion. Amidst this widespread complacency and self-congratulation, only one voice dared to offer a stark warning of the impending catastrophe: Paul Warburg. He courageously declared, "If the market continues like this, a widespread depression will sweep the entire country." His prescient words, however, were summarily dismissed, met only with derisive laughter and outright scorn. No one among the high-flying elites wished to heed the pessimist. Money flowed like an endless river, businesses expanded at breakneck speed, and bankers, confident in their perceived genius, clinked their champagne glasses in triumphant celebration. Then, in September 1929, the collective euphoria surrounding the market reached its absolute zenith. Financial indicators shattered all previous records, soaring to unprecedented heights. The sitting president, Herbert Hoover, received a reassuring letter from his economic advisors, confidently proclaiming, "The market will correct itself. The future looks bright." A mere 5 days later, that seemingly bright and unassailable future catastrophically collapsed. October 24th, 1929. Dawn reluctantly broke over New York City, yet this particular Thursday did not herald a day of golden opportunity. Instead, the very air felt oppressively heavy, palpably thick with an undercurrent of anxious rumors. As the clock approached 9 o'clock in the morning, stockbrokers on Wall Street exchanged nervous, wary glances. The opening bell shrieked, echoing through the trading floor, and within a harrowing few seconds, the entire edifice began to unravel. The market index plummeted by a staggering 11% in that single, brutal day. Trading screens flashed an alarming sea of red numbers, painting a grim picture. While ordinary people struggled to fully comprehend the intricate financial mechanics, they instinctively felt a primal, gut-wrenching fear. Stocks that had commanded immense fortunes just the day before were now rendered virtually worthless. And the most terrifying realization, in this sudden, desperate downturn, absolutely no one was willing to buy. Outside the hallowed doors of the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street, a bewildered, desperate crowd rapidly converged, frantically searching for answers, for any shred of understanding. Men in their expensive, tailored suits frantically shouted into telephones, their voices hoarse with panic. Women openly wept, their faces etched with despair. Newspapers, their headlines stark and terrifying, screamed, "The market collapses." Within a matter of hours, what began as localized financial chaos swiftly escalated into a full-blown national crisis. One horrified witness vividly described the scene, remarking, "It looked like an open-air madhouse." Inside the exchange, bankers desperately attempted to maintain an outward facade of calm. Employees moved about with forced composure, acting as if absolutely nothing catastrophic was unfolding, not out of a lack of fear, but from the chilling understanding that the entire market system's survival hinged precariously on sustained public confidence. Should genuine, widespread panic take hold, the entire intricate financial edifice would undoubtedly crumble. Amidst the burgeoning chaos, a familiar, distinctive figure emerged, Charles Mitchell. With determined resolve, he pushed his way through the surging crowd, his destination the imposing J.P. Morgan building, located directly across the street from the frantic exchange. Within its formidable walls, the nation's most powerful financial magnates were already convened: Thomas Lamont, Albert Wiggin, William Potter, and Seward Prosser. Behind tightly closed, mahogany doors, they deliberated, ultimately making the audacious decision to attempt the seemingly impossible, to single-handedly rescue the collapsing market. They pooled an immense sum, investing over $100 million to strategically purchase shares of major, blue-chip companies. Their immediate objective was clear: to halt the precipitous slide and, crucially, to restore a glimmer of public confidence. For a fleeting few hours, their concerted intervention appeared to yield results. By the close of that tumultuous day, the market index showed a slight, fragile stabilization. The press, desperate for good news, effusively celebrated, declaring, "The great men saved Wall Street." But this proved to be nothing more than a cruel illusion, a flimsy bandage applied to a deep, ultimately fatal wound. The ensuing weekend offered a deceptive, uneasy calm, a brief respite before the inevitable. On Monday, October 28th, the market gates reopened, and hell, quite literally, began all over again. The index plummeted by an astonishing 38 points in that single day alone, marking one of the most catastrophic drops in recorded financial history. And on Tuesday, October 29th, the unfolding disaster reached its horrifying, undeniable peak. Banks, individual investors, ordinary citizens, virtually everyone with a stake in the economy suffered staggering, irreparable losses. It's grimly estimated that in a mere 5 days, a staggering $25 billion in wealth simply vanished into thin air. Some prominent figures lost unimaginable fortunes. Others, utterly bereft of hope, tragically lost their very lives. Newspapers of the era sensationalized stories of suicides, of desperate men reputedly throwing themselves from the heights of skyscrapers. And while many of those specific accounts were likely exaggerated for dramatic effect, the pervasive, crushing feeling of despair and ruin was horrifyingly real. An entire generation bore witness as their collective future, once so bright, evaporated before their very eyes. This cataclysmic crisis refused to be contained within the hallowed confines of the trading floors. Instead, it relentlessly spread, insidiously infecting factories, shuttering stores, and ultimately devastating countless homes. People, suddenly stripped of their livelihoods, found themselves utterly unable to pay their debts. Banks, having recklessly extended credit, possessed no reserves, their vaults empty, their operations frozen. And crucially, the government, clinging to outdated ideologies, remained paralyzed, doing virtually nothing to stem the tide. The United States, once proudly heralded as the richest country on the planet, had just fundamentally and spectacularly broken. The Wall Street crash, in hindsight, was merely the violent first tremor. What followed was an economic earthquake of unprecedented magnitude, one that violently shook every single corner of the nation. As countless banks across the country began to shutter their doors, Money seemed to vanish from the entire financial system as if swallowed by the very earth beneath their feet. Citizens, gripped by an understandable desperation, rushed en masse to withdraw their life savings, only to find tellers with no cash to disperse, just a profound, mirrored fear in their eyes. Within weeks, thousands upon thousands of banks catastrophically failed. Entire families were cruelly stripped of everything they had ever accumulated. Homes were ruthlessly foreclosed, businesses collapsed and shut down, and once bustling factories went dark, one after another, devastatingly, leaving behind an eerie silence. The United States, once a radiant global symbol of unparalleled abundance and opportunity, was tragically transformed into a nation overwhelmed by widespread unemployment. While newspapers optimistically spun narratives of a merely temporary crisis, the harsh reality on the ground was starkly, brutally different. The very essence of the American dream had not merely faded. It had shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. In New York City, the verdant expanse of Central Park, once a playground for the affluent, was grotesquely repurposed, transforming into sprawling, makeshift camps for the homeless. Crude shacks, constructed from scavenged cardboard and rusted cans, often accompanied by improvised fires, rapidly proliferated across areas where wealthy children had once innocently played. These desolate settlements were derisively dubbed Hoovervilles, a bitter, mocking epithet aimed squarely at President Herbert Hoover, who was widely and angrily accused of failing to take decisive action to avert or alleviate the unfolding national tragedy. Across the devastated landscape, desperate men scoured every conceivable avenue for employment, however meager. Women endured endless, humiliating lines for a solitary piece of bread, while children, robbed of their innocence, learned far too early the brutal, unforgiving meaning of true hunger. The social climate became acutely unbearable, permeated by a profound sense of injustice. The once affluent lost their grand mansions and luxurious lifestyles, while the poor, already marginalized, were stripped of their last vestiges of dignity. Yet, through it all, the government stubbornly clung to its laissez-faire ideology, repeatedly insisting that the market would, somehow, miraculously correct itself. But it emphatically did not. For the very first time in their history, a profound, chilling realization dawned upon Americans. The very system that had so grandly promised them boundless prosperity and opportunity had, in their greatest hour of need, utterly abandoned them. This pervasive desperation inevitably spawned a tidal wave of deep-seated distrust. Churches, once places of quiet worship, swelled with throngs of desperate believers fervently searching for solace and a glimmer of hope. Political rallies, meanwhile, erupted with raw, palpable anger. Some voices passionately demanded justice for the wrongs committed. Others, more radically, openly called for revenge. The international press, observing the American collapse with a mixture of horror and schadenfreude, disseminated shocking images of endless lines snaking outside overflowing soup kitchens. Headlines universally proclaimed, "The giant has fallen." Far from the urban centers, in the vast agricultural heartland, the situation was demonstrably no better. A cruel combination of relentless drought and devastating dust storms utterly ravaged crops across a vast region, a catastrophe that would forever be known as the infamous Dust Bowl. Faced with utter ecological and economic ruin, thousands upon thousands of farming families were forced to abandon their ancestral lands. They undertook arduous migrations westward in a desperate, futile search for an opportunity that, in truth, had ceased to exist anywhere. The Great Depression, therefore, transcended the mere definition of an economic crisis. It inflicted a deep, festering wound upon the very soul of the nation, a scar that would linger for generations. Yet, amidst the overwhelming tide of misery and despair, a faint, flickering spark of hope tentatively began to ignite. By 1932, the American people, utterly exhausted and disillusioned, collectively decided that the status quo was simply intolerable. A new, promising name materialized on the political horizon, accompanied by a compelling vision and an explicit promise of profound change: Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The weary country was undeniably ready for a new beginning, a fresh start. Yet the task of rebuilding shattered trust and restoring national faith would prove to be nothing short of monumental. The once mighty nation, formerly the most powerful in the world, found itself brought dramatically to its knees. Unemployment had soared to unimaginable, devastating levels. A staggering 1 in 4 Americans was without a job, their livelihoods obliterated. Banks continued to shutter their doors en masse. Factories lay rusting and desolate, and a pervasive, suffocating desperation permeated every single corner of society. It was against this desolate, harrowing landscape that a transformative new leader appeared before the cameras, his voice imbued with a captivating blend of calm assurance and resolute firmness: Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He boldly articulated a vision for a New Deal, a comprehensive and ambitious program designed specifically to rekindle hope and restore the shattered spirit of the American people. Roosevelt's immediate and paramount goal was to restore the utterly eroded public confidence. To achieve this, he issued a swift, dramatic order for the temporary closure of all banks nationwide, a drastic, yet necessary, measure intended to halt the spiraling financial panic. When these banks eventually reopened, the government unequivocally guaranteed that all deposits would be rigorously protected by a newly established, vital institution: the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. For the very first time in years, ordinary citizens could finally feel a genuine sense of security that their hard-earned money was truly safe. Yet, Roosevelt understood implicitly that merely protecting existing assets was insufficient. He recognized the imperative to actively rebuild the nation from its foundations. Consequently, he launched an ambitious series of massive federal programs, specifically designed to create widespread employment opportunities and breathe new life into the devastated economy. Almost overnight, tens of thousands of men were mobilized, embarking on vital projects constructing new roads, essential dams, public schools, and magnificent national parks. The once unfamiliar initials WPA, Works Progress Administration, and CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, swiftly became powerful symbols of this emergent new era, an exchange of honest work for restored human dignity. Americans, at long last, found themselves with something tangible to lose once more, and, crucially, something profoundly worth fighting for. Concurrently, within the halls of Congress, a dedicated Senate Banking Committee was meticulously formed, tasked with the critical mission of investigating the true, underlying causes of the catastrophic 1929 market crash. What these diligent investigators painstakingly uncovered proved to be far more scandalous and deeply unsettling than anyone had dared to imagine. Over the course of 3 years of exhaustive hearings, thousands upon thousands of pages of testimony meticulously revealed an uncomfortable, damning truth. The powerful men who had ostensibly steered the operations of Wall Street were, in a significant number of cases, brazenly corrupt and utterly unscrupulous. Charles Mitchell, ironically the very same charismatic banker who had so vigorously fueled the speculative investment frenzy, was formally accused of egregious tax evasion, having illicitly transferred stocks to his wife. Richard Whitney, the esteemed president of the New York Stock Exchange itself, was unmasked as having brazenly stolen money directly from his own unsuspecting clients. And the supposedly prestigious J.P. Morgan Bank was scandalously exposed for maintaining clandestine lists of their privileged friends. This was a roster that included influential politicians, respected judges, and prominent businessmen who were systematically offered highly preferential insider deals. Among those damning names was, shockingly, none other than Calvin Coolidge, the former U.S. president who had so adamantly insisted that banks were perfectly capable of self-regulation and thus required no government oversight. These sensational hearings rapidly transformed into a captivating national spectacle. For the very first time in American history, ordinary citizens watched with rapt attention as the supposed untouchables, the titans of finance and politics, were publicly interrogated and held accountable. A potent mix of simmering public anger and profound relief swept through the nation. At long last, it seemed, a semblance of justice was finally being served. Even with these initial victories, Roosevelt wisely recognized that the path to full national recovery would be arduous and protracted. The economy, in fact, would not truly and comprehensively rebound until the advent of yet another devastating global tragedy, World War II. Nevertheless, the New Deal had irrevocably altered something far more fundamental than mere economic statistics. It had profoundly redefined the intrinsic relationship between the American people and their government. The United States was slowly but surely beginning to grasp a critical lesson: that an economic system devoid of proper oversight and robust regulation was not, in fact, a bastion of freedom, but rather an undeniable, catastrophic recipe for disaster. The Great Depression, far from being an isolated American economic tragedy, manifested as a profound global fracture. While its destructive epicenter undeniably lay on Wall Street, the devastating shock waves radiated outward, impacting virtually every corner of the planet. The spectacular collapse of the American giant inevitably dragged Europe down with it, a continent still desperately struggling to recover from the immense devastation of World War I. What had once represented a fragile hope for reconstruction and renewed prosperity swiftly devolved into a bleak, sprawling landscape of rampant unemployment, pervasive poverty, and soul-crushing despair. In England, for instance, industrial production plummeted by nearly half its former capacity. Factories ceased operations en masse, leaving millions of dedicated workers cruelly stripped of their livelihoods. In France, countless small businesses, the lifeblood of local economies, simply collapsed under the weight of the crisis. But in Germany, the impact was nothing short of devastating. A nation already suffocating beneath the crushing burden of crippling war debts and perilously reliant on a steady flow of American loans found itself, literally overnight, completely cut off from its primary source of essential income. The ramifications of the Depression extended far beyond the purely economic realm. They were profoundly political, ideologically transformative, and, most acutely, deeply human. The German people, already deeply impoverished and still reeling from the humiliation of war, began a desperate, fervent search for a powerful savior. And it was precisely in the midst of that widespread desperation and national despair that Adolf Hitler seized his opportune moment. He expertly promised the beleaguered populace jobs, crucial economic stability, and a restoration of shattered national pride. Millions, desperate for relief, flocked to his banner and followed him blindly. Thus, a financial crisis born in the opulent halls of Wall Street ultimately, and tragically, ended up paving the bloody, irreversible path for the rise of Nazism and the horrors it unleashed. Similarly, in Italy, the burgeoning fascism of Benito Mussolini gained formidable strength, propelled by its authoritarian message of total state control and centralized economic planning. And within the confines of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin relentlessly consolidated his iron-fisted power, adroitly presenting communism as the sole viable, stable alternative to the perceived chaos and inherent instability of Western capitalism. The Great Depression, inadvertently and tragically, had effectively ignited the smoldering flames of the next global conflagration, World War II. In the United States, while Roosevelt's New Deal undoubtedly brought essential relief and stability, the profound wound inflicted upon the national psyche never fully healed. For nearly an entire decade, millions of Americans continued to live under a pervasive cloud of anxiety and fear. They forever remembered the harrowing day, their hard-earned money, and with it, their fundamental faith in the system, irrevocably vanished. The nation was fundamentally and irrevocably transformed. A naive, blind trust in the unfettered market gave way, replaced by a new paradigm emphasizing robust regulation, diligent oversight, and targeted government intervention. The potent myth of endless, uninterrupted progress had, with brutal finality, died. And yet, even from that profound, encompassing darkness, a vital and enduring lesson emerged, one that continues to resonate powerfully to this very day. Unchecked power, without appropriate limits, inevitably corrupts. Greed, cunningly disguised as boundless optimism, possesses the devastating potential to utterly destroy once mighty empires. And ultimately, the deepest, most pervasive crises are not merely quantifiable in terms of dollars lost, but immeasurably in the countless human lives that were irrevocably altered. The compelling story of the Great Depression is, at its core, a poignant narrative of how a powerful nation was brutally forced to confront the harsh limits of its own unbridled ambition. It is also a stark testament to how the entire world, interconnected and vulnerable, ultimately paid a staggering price for foolishly believing that boundless prosperity could, indeed, grow unchecked and forever. Thank you for staying with us and watching all the way to the very end of this compelling narrative. If you found this video engaging and you're passionate about exploring these types of profound historical accounts, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel. This way, you won't miss any of our upcoming videos and can continue to discover more fascinating and insightful stories from history. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.